One of the biggest complaints when the Lumix S9 launched was that there weren't a lot of small lenses for such a small body. They first launched the S9 alongside the Lumix S26mm f8, which was a tiny but manual focused pancake lens. And of course, that wasn't really ideal for day-to-day use. And then they started pairing the Lumix S9 with the 20 to 60mm f3.5 to 5.6 lens, which I heard great things about, but it was still quite big for the S9 body. But now, about 2 years after the S9 launch, we have a few more compact options. They released the Lumix S18 to 40mm f4.5 to 6.3, which feels like the kit lens that S9 should have launched with. They also just recently released the 40mm f2. And a lot of third-party manufacturers have also started filling in the gaps, like Viltrox just launched AF 28mm f4.5 chip lens, and there's a TT Artisan autofocus 40mm f2 lens. After trying out a few of those lenses, I think my favorite is still the Lumix S18 to 40mm lens. I think one of the things that I like the most about this lens is the size. Now, of course, the size is no longer the standout feature as there are more lenses coming into market, but I think one thing that does come along with this kit lens is the focus reliability. At least on the TT Artisan 40mm lens, I've had a lot of focus issues even after updating to the latest firmware, and that just hasn't been the case with this lens. And compared to those prime lenses, 18 to 40mm is really a great zoom range in such a small body. It did bother me at first that the lens had to be rotated out and extended before you can start using it, and it's not as instant as using a prime, but the fact that it stays this compact and still gives you a usable zoom range is really useful. In terms of zoom lenses, there's also the Panasonic 24 to 60mm f2.8, which is a really interesting lens because it gives you constant 2.8 aperture, but it's actually bigger and heavier than a third-party Sigma 28 to 70mm f2.8 lens, so it doesn't really make sense on the S9 body if your goal is to keep it small. But if you still want to pair a better zoom lens with your S9, I think one of my favorites is the Lumix S28 to 200mm f4 to 7.1. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's like surprisingly small for the zoom range. I think it's one of the smallest full frame lenses that has that kind of zoom range. I would use that if I was traveling and if I wanted a bit more reach. The thing is that is special about the 18 to 40mm lens though is the 18mm focal length. 18mm is actually quite wide. At the NYX parade, that mattered a lot because there were crowds everywhere. People were really packed together. Most of the times, I couldn't just go back to take in more of the scene. So having the 18mm meant I could capture all the people, the building, the signs, all the movement of the people, and the energy of the street. On the longer end, 40mm might not feel like enough reach, but another feature of Lumix S9 is that with hybrid zoom, you can get about 62mm in video when you're shooting 4K and 79mm in photo if you're okay with 6 megapixels, or you can reach as far as 125mm if you're okay with 2.5 megapixel photos. Those are not really optically those ranges, and it does degrade your photo quality as you zoom in more, but I think those still can come in handy when you don't want to do post-processing and you just want to get the picture or the video as you see it. The recently released Lumix 40mm f2, you can also use the aperture ring to activate hybrid zoom and punch in. That is great, but you know, the 18 to 40mm, you are already getting the tighter 40mm and optically, and then you can use the hybrid zoom as well. And I know one of the biggest things people will complain about is the variable and smaller aperture. But personally, I think unless I'm trying to shoot portraits specifically, I don't mind it as much as I thought I would. And even with portraits, I feel like a lot of people I work with, including myself, have developed a bit of a bokeh fatigue where like photo shot wide open that completely blurs out the background can sometimes feel too curated, too polished. And at least in my experience, people are looking for more natural images that feel authentic and less overly produced. So when I'm traveling or just taking pictures of groups who are trying to capture a scene, or taking pictures of my friends and family, I'm really leaning towards keeping more detail in the frame anyway, and that often means stopping down to f5.6, f8, even f11. So it's really not as much of a downside for me anymore. And if you're worried about the high ISO that comes with it, you probably already heard that, a lot of photo editing software have gotten really good at noise reduction. If you don't want to rely on that smooth process log, then the Lumix S9 has an excellent in-body image stabilization, which means you can still slow down your shutter speed and still get low ISO clean images in a lot of situations. So those are the things I really like about this lens. One of the only problems I have with this lens is that the build quality doesn't feel amazing. I can overlook that because the whole point of the lens is to be small and light. But when shooting video, especially when zooming in and out, I have noticed that something that bothers me, which is like when I zoom through the range, there are moments where the brightness of the whole image changes in a video. It looks like exposure stepping, and my guess is that is related to the lens and how it's built, but I really haven't figured it out. Like, I've tried a few settings, like changing the instant preview on and off and stuff, but I haven't really found a fix yet. It could be just the lens, or it could be one of my settings. Let me know if you find a solution. I'll pin a comment down below if I do find a solution. Overall, I think Lumix S18 to 40 millimeter lens is still my favorite lens for S9. It keeps the camera really compact. It gives you a really useful wide angle, and it has good enough range for everyday shooting. And with hybrid zoom, it really becomes more versatile than it looks on paper.